Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Hello everyone. In this occasion, we will present about quantitative research. And we will explain about experimental research and correlational research. We are from group 3. The members are Kirana Dara, Ernita, and Khoirul Mubin Fatyadi. The concept maps. In this quantitative research, we will explain about experimental research that consists of several designs. There are pre-experimental design, true experimental design, factorial design, and quasi-experimental design. And for correlational research, there are two design. There are explanatory design and prediction design. Background. Research approaches are plans and the procedures for research that span the steps from broad assumptions to detailed methods of data collection, analysis, and interpretation. Three research approaches are advanced, qualitative, quantitative, and mixed methods. Often the distinction between qualitative research and quantitative research is framed in terms of using words, qualitative, rather than numbers, quantitative, or using closed-ended questions, quantitative hypothesis, rather than open-ended questions, qualitative interview questions. Quantitative research. In quantitative research, the problems brought by the researcher must be clear, while the problem formulation, instrument testing, theory basis, hypothesis formulation, conclusion, and suggestion is in qualitative research are still temporary and will develop after the researcher enters the field. After the problem is identified and defined, then the problem is formulated. The formulation of the problem is generally stated in a question sentence. With this question, it will be able to guide researchers for further research activities. Based on the formulation of the problem, the researchers use various theories to answer them. So, the theory in quantitative research is used to answer the formulation of the research problem. Then we will explain about experimental research. When did experiment develop? Experimental research began in the late 19th and early 20th centuries with psychological experiments. By 1903, Schuyler used experimental and control groups, and his use became so commonplace that he felt no need to provide a rationale for them. Then in 1916, McCall advanced the idea of randomly assigning individuals to groups. Authoring a major book in 1925, How to Conduct an Experiment, McCall firmly established the procedure of comparing groups. By 1963, Campbell and Stanley had identified the major types of experimental design. Since the 1980s, experiments have grown in sophistication and complexity, largely because of computers and improved statistical procedures. Researchers now employ multiple independent and dependent variables, compare more than two groups, and study different types of experimental units of analysis, such as entire organizations, group, and individuals. The first one is pre-experimental design. It is said to be pre-experimental design because this design is not a serious experiment. In this design, there are still external variables that influence the result of the dependent variable, so that the experimental results, which are the dependent variable, are not only influenced by the independent variable. This can happen in the absence of a control variable, and the sample is not randomly selected. There are several types of pre-experimental design, namely one-shot case study, one group pre-test post-test design, and intact group comparison. Next, this is the first kind of pre-experimental design, that is one-shot case study. X as treatment given or independent variable, and O as observation or dependent variable. The example is the influence of online learning as X on students' interest in learning as O. Okay, the second kind of pre-experimental design will be explained by Kirana.
The second kind is one group pre-test post-test design. In this design, there is a pre-test before being treated. Thus, the treatment results can be found to be more accurate because it can compare with condition before being treated. This design can be described as follows: O1 as pre-test value and O2 as post-test value. The example is the effect of giving exam grades on student final exam results. Next. And the last is intact group comparison. In this design, there is one group used for research, but divided into two, namely half the group for the experiment, which was given treatment, and half for the control group, which was not given treatment. The research paradigm can be described as follows: O1 as the result of measurement of half of the treated group, and O2 measurement result for the untreated half of the group, and the treatment effect is O1 minus O2. The example, this research work was conducted to determine the effect of the demonstration method on student abilities in volleyball lessons. There are two classes that will practice volleyball. Next. Then there is true experimental design. It is said to be a true experiment because in this design, the researcher can control all the variables that affect the course of the experiment. Thus, the internal validity or the quality of the research design can be high. True experiments comprise the most rigorous and strong experimental design because of equating of the group through random assignment. There are two true experimental design, namely post-test only control design and the pre-test post-test control group design. Next. The first kind is post-test only control design. The research paradigm can be described as follows as the picture. In this design, there are two groups, each of which is randomly selected R. The first group was given treatment X and the other group was not. The treated group is called the experimental group and the untreated group is called the control group. The effect of treatment is O1 divided O2. Next. The second type is pre-test post-test control group design. The research paradigm can be described as follows. In this design, there are two groups selected randomly. The given a pre-test to determine the initial state whether there is a difference between the experimental group and the control group. The pre-test results are good if the experimental group score are not significantly different, and the treatment effect is O2 minus O1 minus O4 minus O3. Next. There is a factorial design. The factorial design is a modification of the true experimental design, namely with regard to the possibility of moderating variables affect the treatment or independent variable on the result or variable dependent. Like the picture, the factorial design paradigm can be described as follows. In this design, all groups are selected randomly, then individually was given a pretest. Next. Example of factorial design. Research was conducted to determine the effect of new work producer on service satisfaction to the community. Four were chosen for this group randomly. The moderator variable is gender, that is male Y1 and female Y2. Treatment new work produced was tried in the group. The first experiment they have been given a pretest. O1 is open male group, and the second experimental group they had been given a pretest. O5 is group girl. Effect of the treatment X on service satisfaction for boy group is O2 minus O1 minus O4 minus O3. Effect of treatment to the value of sales of good for the group of women is O6 minus O5 minus O8 minus O7. Next. Then there is quasi-experimental design. Quasi-experimental design are similar to randomized experimental design in that they involve manipulation of an independent variable, but differ in that subjects are not randomly assigned to treatment group. The following shows two form or quasi-experimental design, namely time series design and non-equivalent control group design. Next, time series design. In this design, the group used for the study cannot selected randomly. Before being given treatment, the group was given a pretest up to 4 times with the intention of knowing the stability and clarity of the group's condition before being given treatment. After the stability of the group condition can be seen clearly, then is given treatment. This research design uses only one group, so it does not require a control group. A good pretest result is O1 equal O2 equal O3 equal O4, and a good treatment result is O5 equal O6 equal O7 equal O8. The magnitude of the treatment effect is O5 plus O6 plus O7 plus O8 minus O1 plus O2 plus O3 plus O4. Next. Non-equivalent control group design. In this design, the experimental group and the control group were not chosen randomly. For example, O1 and O3 are the degrees of employee health before the morning exercise, and O2 is the degree of employee health after 1 year of morning exercise. O4 is the degree of the health of employees who are not given morning exercise. The effect of morning exercise on the degree of employee health is O2 minus O1 minus O4 minus O3. Next, correlation research will explain by Khoirul Mubin.
All right, thank you. I, Khoirul Mubin Fatyadi, will continue the presentation about correlational research. Correlational research. In this design, the researchers do not attempt to control or manipulate the variable as an experiment. Instead of the related correlation research provide an opportunity for you to predict scores and explain the relationship among variables. In correlation research design, investigators use the correlation statistical test to describe and ensure the degree of association or relationship between two or more variables or certain scores. When do the researcher use correlational research? The researcher use this design when the researcher seeks to relate two or more variables to see if they influence each other, such as the relationship between teachers who endorse developmentally appropriate practices and their use of the whole language approach to read instruction. There are two primary correlation designs. Those are experimentary designs and prediction design. Experimentary designs, research is interested in the extent to which two variables or more covary, that is, where changes in one variable are reflected in changes in the other. Explanatory design consists of a simple association between two variables, sense of humor and preference in drama, or more than two variables, pressure from friends, or feelings of isolation that contribute to being drinking. The characteristic when identified is first, the investigator correlate two or more variables. The researchers collect data at one point in time. The investigator analyzes all participants as a single group. The researchers obtains at least two scores for each individuals in the group one from each variables. The researchers reports the use of the correlation statistical test or an extension of it in the data analysis. Finally, the researcher makes interpretation or draws conclusion from the statistical test results. And the second is prediction research to identify variables that will predict an outcome or a criterion. The investigator identifies one or more predictor variables and a criterion or outcomes variable. A predictor variable is a variable used to make a forecast about an outcome in correlation research. How to identify it? The prediction study, the authors typically include the word prediction in the title. It might also be in the purpose statement or research question. The research typically measures the prediction variables at one point in time and the criterion variable at the later point in time. The authors forecast future performance. Okay, we can conclude that in quantitative research, there are two kind divided as two kind: experimental research and correlation design, correlation research. There are several forms of research designs that can be used in experimental research, namely experimental design, through experimental design, factorial design, and quasi-experimental designs. And also in the correlational design, the two primary correlational design are experiments, and predictions. Okay, thank you for your attention. We say thank you for your attention. If you have any question, you can give your write your question in commenter section. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.